Pellegra, BEC, for their investment decisions that they've made. But in particular today, in coming here, I'd like to acknowledge the people of Whyalla and the workforce of the Whyalla Steelworks. This is a beautiful city. And I'd also, in particular, the school kids who are sitting here so patiently, believe it or not, this announcement's all about your future, so thank you very much for coming and behaving so well. Just a few brief remarks. This is personal for me today. I first came to Whyalla 22 years ago as a young organiser in the Iron Workers Union. That's when Whyalla was under the stewardship of BHP. And I've seen changes since then. There was One Steel, the spin-out from BHP, and then the Arium purchase, and then, of course, the very difficult time 2+ years ago with the administration. And now I come here again with GFG Alliance showing the leadership. I've heard talk of change before in the steel industry, and I've seen around Australia the steel industry in retreat. From BHP in Newcastle to Kembla Grange and Port Kembla, I've seen steel lines close down at Western Port. And there has been a view periodically stated in some parts of the media and some more conservative elements of Australian economic theory which says that the world is too hard for Australian manufacturing, that we don't really need a steel industry in Australia, that day has passed us, and there are people better in the world at building and manufacturing steel and Australian manufacturing more generally. So I'm pleased to congratulate Sanjeev Gupta, because what we're seeing here, somewhat, I think, ironically, from someone who has come to this country and not from within this country, is we've got a gentleman who sees a vision for the Australian steel industry. And I think sometimes it takes someone from outside to remind us occasionally how lucky we are and what we need to do, invest in ourselves in the future. Thank you very much, Sanjeev. But the other point I want to make today is to acknowledge the workforce. It is true sometimes that some people say that the workers in Australia are paid too much money. They say that we cannot compete with even other first world countries. But I know the steel workers of Australia and I know steel workers of Whyalla. You are highly skilled. You have coped with change, and I've mentioned successive managements who've long gone and taken their packages, but you're still here working. You've adapted to new technology, you work in teams, you problem solve. I've seen how you've literally had to hold your breath when the shutdown of the blast furnace wasn't always sure if it would come back online. But time and time again you present, and most recently, I know it was very difficult. And unions in Australia sometimes get a bad rap from some people who don't understand what really happens. But I congratulate the delegates and the workforce and their leadership who, in this case, to help make sure that Whyalla's future was certain, accepted changes to shift roster patterns, shutdowns on Sundays, perhaps not getting the wage rises which people feel were appropriate. Not easy decisions, and I understand the apprehension. And this wasn't about someone else doing it somewhere else. There was you having to make decisions, and I understand the apprehension and perhaps even the scepticism. But what you did is you demonstrated and you delivered. We want to see the investment flow through and the promises kept. I understand that. But what makes today so personal for me is that the workforce, their families, the reason why we're sitting here celebrating is in large part because the workforce of Whyalla do not know when they're beaten, they do not know how to give up, they believe in a steel industry, they believe in Whyalla being a steel town. So you have my congratulations. You are an example to all of Australia. So in conclusion, what today means, I think, is it means that perhaps the young people in the future won't have to leave Whyalla to have a future. It means that the retired steelworkers who bought their houses years ago, the value in your house will remain. It means that people will be moving to Whyalla. But what you also show is the future for this country. Cooperation, not conflict. Renewable energy working with heavy manufacturing. The economy and the environment working together. And what I promise, from my point of view, is that in Canberra we will make sure that when we build railways in Australia, we buy Australian steel. When we build defence equipment in Australia, we buy Australian steel. And it also means that when other countries try and dump steel product in Australia below the cost of what it costs to make in their home jurisdictions, we will not be a soft touch. We will strengthen the anti-dumping laws. There is no shame in backing Australia. Sanjeev has outlined an exciting vision. My vision is this is a country that not only digs up stuff and ships it overseas, but we dig it up here and we manufacture it here and we keep the profits and jobs at home where they belong. Thank you very much.
That's Opposition Leader Bill Shorten there speaking at Whyalla in South Australia, announcing developments for the steelworks locally and the community, backed by the British industrialist Sanjeev Gupta, who bought the steelworks in 2017. The steelworks had gone into administration just before that, putting their future, the whole town, in doubt. The Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, is also in Whyalla for those announcements.